Hi everyone and welcome back. In this video we are going to talk about some of the downside of using the server-side rendered props and static props and what people generally do the mistake while writing these functions. Okay, so first we will take a look onto the build output. You can see that these all different files we are getting. Dot means these files are statically rendered, and the lambda means this is a server-side renders. Okay, that means it might be using get initial props, get static props, or get server-side props. Okay, so now we already know that these different methods. Get server-side props means on every request server will compute or server will fetch the data and will send it, right? But we also talked about get static props and get static paths, right? Those are different than this because for those methods the data is being fetched at the build time only, so that the final HTML can be sent and can be cached, so that it behaves differently than get server side props. Okay, now what we will do is we'll create our one single page which is blog.js. Okay, it will become route and we will just use some code snippet to render the HTML, and we'll see how it behaves in our templates builds. Okay, now if I build it, so it's just a table, so it should be statically rendered. A blog route will get added in the production build, and we can see it will take some time. Here we can see this blog is also added, but this is also statically rendered. You can see dot means automatically generated as a static HTML plus JSON. But what if we are actually passing this data dynamically? I will just use this snippet now, which is doing nothing but we have some kind of an array. Okay, the only difference here is export cons export default users. I will explain this. Okay, this example and the previous example, the only difference is now we have the users array somewhere. I mean, we are actually feeding the data to the HTML template. And now if we try to see the build, do we see any difference? Because currently the blog is taking, okay, it's in bytes. Okay, now if I just do npm run build, and we'll wait for some time once this is done. Now what we are trying to achieve is what all different possibilities when you are having data in just an array iterating using dot map, or when you are actually getting the data maybe through Axios call. You are not using these methods get server side props, get initial props. Then what will happen to your bundle size? So blog is 429 bytes, which is fine for now. Now what we are doing is when you are doing a next build, what is happening with this our blog.js, it is taking 429 bytes, which is still fine. Now consider that you started writing the Axios block and started writing the code in that. So it can be a simple like you have written Axios fetch call in your state. So in this example where we have just a const users and we are iterating onto these users in our HTML, this is fine. When we are running npm run build, we are just getting the smaller size. Okay, and this is statically rendered page. Now what we are going to do is we are going to just do some changes, like we are using Axios for making a call. Okay, so I have written some snippet of the code. We will just go through that. What we are doing, we are using use effect, use state to just make an API call, get the data and set the data in the hooks, like set users, otherwise set error and set loading. So these three different states we have added. So once we have the data, we should be able to load that in the HTML template. So this is the sections and these are our users. Okay, so in body what we are doing is we are just running users.map, and for every user we are actually rendering it in a row, user and key. So if you just see in the row, what we are saying is we are just making all these columns will have user.username. Let's say we have a username only. We can add more. Key equal to index, which we have added. Okay, now if we try to build it, so what we are doing is, from the previous example, we just added these hooks. Use effect will get triggered, it will do the fetch data is a async call. Okay, and it will set the users, and now we are rendering the users, list of users, and we are displaying it. Now if I try to run this with npm run build and see what changes we have done, I hope we have saved it. We are returning this content. All looks fine. We have also installed Axios to run this. Now if you just try to see this chunk of blog, now it has increased to, you can say, 12 folds, because now the size is 6.25 KB. Okay, this is what I was highlighting. If you are misusing these things and you are not using these specific methods which has been provided, like get server side props. Now if you just try to use the method which we already have, now if you just try to render this blog page, then you will see an API call is being made while loading the page, because fetch data is happening at the runtime. When the component is getting rendered, it is making this JSON placeholder call, data is being received, and then you are able to see the data. Here you can just do some kind of a checks, like user is there are different states we are having, right? You can just set something. If error is there, then what you can say is, if error is there, then some error occurred. You can wrap this inside a span tag. Okay, and here you can just do this once you have all the user array. Okay, now on top of that, let's try to simplify this, and in this example we are not going to use this axios.getData. We'll do it, but in different way. Okay, we will use our own method, which is export const. So we'll write export const get server side props. We can just copy this from here. So we'll use this helper method, and it is also async. And what it is doing, it is calling another method which is fetch data const data, which is await fetch data. Let's create this method fetch data, and what we are returning from here is props with data which need to be published on the UI. Now we'll just remove this async call and we'll move it to the fetch data. Okay, it's already a function, but we'll just move it outside so that things are good. We don't need these hooks and these use state and all. We'll just create a method here fetch data, which is async await again, await the same data, and what we are doing is we are just returning the response. So in this object, what we are doing is, okay, let's go there, and here we are returning an object. In this object we are saying error is false, and users is response.data, otherwise error is true. So if we are getting catch block, okay, error is true and response.data is null in this particular case. Okay, so this we have returned this fetch data call. Now fetch data call is being made to this get server side props. Okay, and we are able to see the props data. Now props data is injected, so we can actually pass this in our component, which is users comma error if any error has occurred, and users we can simply map If users is there, we can iterate onto it. If error is there, some error has occurred, right? So this is just a same way of doing it. We don't need these hooks now. Same way of doing it with the help of get server side props. Now if I just try to build it, if everything is fine, and we'll check the size now. What is the size of the same data? So you can see it's magic, right? Blog is now revert back to the 422 bytes, right? Similarly, there is another methods like we can use get static props, get initial props, all these methods. Get static props, what it will do is it will fetch the data at the build time only. Okay, if I use get static props, and we'll see it should be get static props. Okay, so we have fixed that error. It was due to we were not returning from here, and now we can see that console.log data, we can remove it. Now props.data, and we can check the bundle size which we are getting in the build. So this is the blog, and you can see dot means automatically generated as a static HTML plus JSON, because we are using get static props, and you can see it is 422 bytes. And even if you try to see the blog HTML in the next build, pages blog HTML, right? It should have this HTML content somewhere, right? You can see this email template and all these properties are there. So this is the props you are passing. It's just a JSON object. All right, so this is what get static props is doing to our component. Okay, now we got the understanding what is get static props, get server side rendered props. And in this particular time when you are using get static props, what do we see? This full circle, right? Full circle means automatically generated as a HTML plus JSON, because it is using get static props. Okay, it is not the server side, it is not having lambda, because we are not using get initial props and get server side props. Okay, so it depends on the use case. When I say like you have same kind of a data, then and you want that data available at the build time, then you can use get static props. This is helpful while caching, and it also makes page more SEO optimized. Get static props and get server side props will mainly use to fetch the data from external source, while get initial props can focus on preparing some props to be populated before page is getting rendered. Okay, so these are the different methods. I hope this video is helpful to understand how to use what all different things to use while you want to fetch the data externally from external data source, which might be changing or which might be a constant JSON.